Perfect. So welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us. This is the first Thought Leadership Series episodes with RiverMeadow and then Applied Value. So episode one today is sort of why make the cloud journey. We're going to give some insights into the business cases behind what cloud migration could mean and how it relates to digitalization. Next slide. By way of introduction, I'll start. My name is Ryan Huff. I'm a partner with Applied Value. Applied Value is a management consulting firm that specializes in cost and capital efficiency, one of the areas where we have been playing with our client base, which spans industrials, technology, white goods, food and bev, pretty much any industry. One of the areas we've been playing with a lot with our clients is in the concept of digitalization. And I think we've seen a couple trends specifically in terms of what sorts of challenges and opportunities digitalization represents, and thought this was a good lead in to also talk and have a conversation with my partner here, Michael Kent, to discuss some of those issues. So Michael, background on yourself.
Thank you, Ryan. Michael Kent, RiverMeadow Software. I'm the CTO, and again, I've been kicking around data center transformation, data center moves, for about 25 years. We're excited to bring some content to you, hopefully to frame this cloud journey and things you need to consider as you go.
Perfect. Thanks, Michael. So if we go to the next and just kind of start with the concept of why digital even. So I think we've taken a look at traditional business models as well as traditional revenue models of companies, and we've seen a stark change over the past couple of years. I think everybody knows that the largest taxi company in the world has no physical assets and is mainly an app and a platform. Most organizations are really pushing towards this concept and trying to figure out what are the ways that they can innovate without thinking about just additional CapEx or additional products. And a lot of what we're seeing is folks even thinking about the concept of products to services. So even if they're manufacturing different widgets, they also have the ability now to offer a service offering on top or layered into their product portfolio. All of this is powered by digitalization. So this is a huge change both offensively and defensively for companies. Offensively meaning new business models and new revenue. Defensively meaning thinking about what sort of efficiencies might be able to occur. Michael, what have you seen? I mean, obviously, with your vast experience in migrating the technology, have you seen a similar trend of folks thinking about digital in a different way?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think really what it boils down to from our perspective is the access to these enabling technologies is better than it ever has been before. And so traditionally, to do a transformation was a step function, right? I had to load up, as you mentioned, there was a big CapEx expenditure. Hope we picked the right vendor, hope we picked the right tool, and we have to fill all of that capacity before we really start seeing the return on investment, et cetera. The accessibility of these services has really allowed different parties to access it cheaper, quicker, and with less encumbrance than ever before, I think, in really information technology.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think if we go to the next, just thinking about what are the journeys that we've seen from our client base. And I think it really starts, Michael, you and I have had conversations about the concept that it's really a cultural change as well. And it really starts off with understanding where do you want to go in the digital space and how are you going to connect it together. We'll talk about challenges for digitalization in a second, but one thing that I'll just highlight is most Fortune 500 companies today don't have a chief digital officer yet, which is kind of crazy if you think about it. And that's certainly something that I think in the next 5 to 10 years we're going to see. But what that means right now is that most organizations, as they think about their digital journeys, they're thinking about it in their silo. So it's either a functional project or a business unit or segment project. And there really isn't this layering of all the different opportunities at once. And so when we come in to work with our client base, I think one of the struggles that we see is this concept of trying to generate the right use cases. Because, as you said, nobody wants to plop down a lot of CapEx or invest a lot of time and energy without getting results. And so I think that the business cases that we've seen start off with really understanding what are those use cases, and making sure that you're taking a look at what data exists today, what data you wish you had, and how do you really combine the two to make sure that you've laid out all the potential priorities and all the potential use cases, both offensively as well as defensively, and picking the ones that are going to be the quickest time to money, and a couple other areas as well in terms of metrics.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that value map is really important, right? And I think it's also important to say that it's going to be a mix, right? So it can be 80-20, 60-40. It doesn't have to be all offensive, all defensive, and it can be some more traditional and some more cutting edge. I think that the pervasiveness of the services and the accessibility of those services allow you to really move the sliding scale somewhere in between to find a comfortable medium of too fast and too slow. So I think that's important as you go through this, and as you incorporate cultural shifts and educational shifts in your team, in finance, and how finance handles the budgeting processes, these kind of things, you have more shades of gray that you have to play with than traditionally with these traditional CapEx models and step functions, these kind of things.
Agreed wholeheartedly. And if we flip to the next and thinking about the different challenges that we've seen, we talked about the major one in terms of CDOs, but I think the other thing is just sort of who gets left holding the bag, and it's really the CIOs. Because today they're being called upon either to create a shadow organization that's going to be able to execute technologically on what the digitalization requirements are, or secondarily, it could also mean that they are, just trying to do their normal corporate IT functions, and in addition, try and think about, okay, well, now I need programmers, now I need software engineers, and it's not just for keeping the lights on and keeping the telecom working. It's now thinking about them being part of the business. And I think that this is a little bit of a differentiation towards them. And I think, this is where we're seeing a lot of challenge, because CIOs aren't necessarily well equipped to be able to handle some of these challenges. And the goal for digital is we want to get more transparent, more flexible, and more predictive. And I think when we think about it from a tech stack, that means that there's got to be new technologies in place and new ways of being able to access data quickly, which I think brings us to cloud.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a similar shift that we saw with the chief security officer, right? 10 years ago, there weren't too many CISOs around to help govern compliance and security of data as it moved around that organization. It was really just the CIO. Give rise to the age of data and the security of that data. Now you have CISOs and you have these specialized functions that are coming out that really a CIO has to have a bit of all this, or he has to employ these folks. He has to be able to collaborate with a chief security officer that really has the depth of the detail of what it is to be secure, what those zones mean, how you classify data. I think we're going to see the same for the CDO, this chief digitalization officer. They're really going to understand the technology stacks, where they can go, and then the three of those CIO, CSO, and really the CDO are going to have to work together for the strategic map and the strategic plan as you move forward with these technologies.
Agreed wholeheartedly. So, I mean, if we think about, security, we think about cost, we think about reliability, and we then think about what are the technologies to get us there. And if you flip to the next, I think this is really where the cloud comes into the play, because digitalization is the end goal, but some of the enablement in terms of technology, I think, are cloud. So we ran a little survey for some of our clients to really understand why people were looking at cloud migration and thinking about what cloud could do for them. And I think a couple things that really popped out. One is sort of the speed of service delivery. So the speed of being able to spin up a use case and being able to not have to, as we talked about already, sink that CapEx in, a lower total cost of ownership, faster ROI, and better flexibility. So a lot of the things that we talk about when we think about digital, and we really try and involve something like a fail-fast methodology, cloud really is an enabler to being able to execute on that, and maybe gain some approvals throughout the executive teams to be able to continue on your cloud journey and, more importantly, your digitalization journey.
Absolutely, and you see some of this pressure now, right? You see the whole concept of shadow IT and folks spinning up cloud instances on a credit card just to get the job done, whether it's the right thing or the wrong thing to do. This is business pressure pushing down on the IT stack and the IT stack and its underlying support mechanisms of finance and procurement not being able to keep up with the need. You see your two biggest bubbles there are 71% speed of IT service delivery. IT needs to be able to deliver services to the business faster and more reactive to the business, thus enabling your second large bubble there, 63% flexibility to react to market conditions. The business cannot be nimble if the services IT provides are not nimble. And again, with this wide array of services that now can be accessed in cloud-based technologies, you have that, and you have that without a big outlay of cash.
Yeah, wholeheartedly agree. So let's look to the next and kind of take a look at what we've seen in terms of adoption of these technologies, right? So if we think about planned cloud usage from 2011 to 2018, you're seeing that almost everybody, I won't say everybody, but most people are really getting into this. And I think that we're really seeing this increase because of exactly what you said, right? The idea that we want to be fast, we want to be flexible, and we don't want to have to spend a lot to get a lot.
True. And one of the things we also see is it's just a great era of kind of innovation, right? Cloud is a new innovation platform. And so folks are seeing problems. We have this problem. How do I ensure that my instances are running at the best possible performance? I'm getting the best price. They're running when I need them to run and no other time. These are spinning off plenty of opportunities for companies to quickly scaffold applications in the cloud. A huge portion of that is just SaaS-based services that you can consume in the cloud. You can rent it, if you will, and not buy it. If you decide it's something that you need to have integral to your stack, then not only have you tried a few, just like test driving a car, not only have you tried a few, but you found the one that really fits your organization, as opposed to going with the largest or the best brand name, only to find that they're shallow in their service offering, or they're not quite in the line with what you need. And so this is just giving rise to this. I mean, I think really the excitement and the possibility, I can finally do these things that were not possible before. Let's run. And so we see a lot of that towards digital transformation.
Yeah, and I think it really is about the run, right? So how can we get things done fast? So if we kind of double click on this and go to the next and look at the expansion and kind of see where things have even gone in the past 2 years. So one, I think you've seen, everybody knows the Salesforces of the world, so the different software platforms. But one of the big changes I think we've seen is now platforms. So people are really trying to base some of their own cloud architecture on what services and platforms they can provide to customers. And we see that if we just take a look at the investment that people are putting into play. So you're seeing that the average investment in 2018 was $2.2 million for companies, up from 1.62. And if you look at enterprises with over 1,000 employees, so big enterprises, that number goes even larger. So folks really are seeing cloud as an enabler to do that. And I think the real next step for those that are sort of on the precipice of this journey is, how do you convince the executive team to make the jump? Because that's always the sticking point, right? Nobody wants to, even if it's a small amount of CapEx or OpEx, nobody wants to approve something without getting the ROI. And so the way that we have been looking at things is, how do we create that business case that makes sense to the CFO, the CEO, the business unit presidents, as well as the technology folks, so that everybody can sing from the same hymnal?
Yeah, and I think a lot of those barriers are coming down, right? As we saw on the cloud growth scale, I think last year there was a lot of hemming and hawing. We hear it's a great thing, but we need more evidence, and no one wants to be the person that set forth in a direction only to have that direction be the wrong direction. So I think that there was some cautious optimism last year. I think the case studies that are coming out, I think that the partnerships that are there, the resourcing that's there, the fantastic work that's coming out of these public clouds is really the inflection point. Now it's easy to find a use case that matches what you're doing and show the value. It's important for these organizations to be able to take that and represent it inward to the business. It's the business's job to look for these steps forward, these efficiencies, et cetera. But it's also their responsibility to make sure it has a good financial base. And so now we're finally starting to see the case studies and the data come out that shows this is what you can expect from a financial base. And I think that was the last hurdle. And once you clear that last hurdle, I think folks are much more comfortable with the sprint toward the end.
Totally agree. So if we flip to the next, this has been our view on how to develop a business case. And this is more thinking about it broadly from digitalization, and we think that cloud is obviously a huge component. The first step is really, what are the use cases? So what are my digital opportunities, both the offensive and defensive that we talked about? And then secondly, once we figure out what those use cases are, what data do we need? What access do we need? What sort of speed do we need? And then how are we going to, from a data and tech integration standpoint, be able to stand up that business case and that use case as quickly as possible? And then what are the best methods for us to be able to meet these expected needs of the data and technology integration? And I think this sort of pathway is something that is tried and true. It works, for any sort of digitalization use case that you have in mind. And I think it also allows you to be able to prioritize the different use cases that you have. Because as I said before, without a chief digital officer, you're going to get a lot of different people pushing on a lot of different types of use cases. And to be able to evaluate them one versus the other and sort of clear out the noise, you've got to have a streamlined process that everything can be repeatable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in that also has to, there has to be some rank stack. And we know that although the best opportunity for digitalization may be big data analytics or something similar, that may also take the longest time. And so in between now and then, there are other opportunities that apply value to your chain than just this one big data transformation project or what have you. And so I think what it really is incumbent upon the use cases to have an array. Here's all the opportunities and here's how we can filter them in. It doesn't have to be serial one after another. They can have different levels of maturity. Some can be deep digitalization. We're changing everything. Some can be light digitalization. We're doing a light transformation on this. Again, just to better position our organization for those key factors: flexibility, speed of delivery, et cetera.
Exactly. And I think so if we go to the next and kind of zero in on what and how we have built business cases for our clients, we really think about different use case benefits, I should say, on the digital side as either cost reduction, so that means that there's an efficiency gain, so more of a defensive play, the increased revenue, where we're going to say, hey, we were getting $1 for whatever we were doing, now we can get $2 because we're offering something that's enriched. Or it could be a new business model, or even increased market share. So we're able to reach more customers, or we're actually changing our business model entirely. And in order to be able to calculate what that business case is, the question is, what sort of flexibility are we bringing to the table with our technology stack? How much more speed do we really have? What is our level of security, which is obviously a very hot topic across, pretty much all of the industries we service? And then what is it going to cost me? And I think when you put the benefits on the bottom and sort of the benefits of cloud technology on the top, you really get an airtight business case to be able to say, let's move forward for this use case. Here's the technology. Here's the vendors that we're going to be able to utilize. And then this is how we're going to be able to execute.
Yeah, absolutely. And then with this concept of a CDO or a CISO, they can then look at this use case. They can answer the points of security. This is what helps keep that airtight case so that you can confidently move forward with this use case and have it meet all the corporate needs. Yeah.
And I think that getting that ROI with sort of that risk adjustment for the security piece, that's something that's very important to be able to execute in my view.
So, yeah, and then in that there's also, just real quick, there's also the concept of this is not expertise you need to have in-house. There are models for this. That's the other thing I think that is accelerating this cloud growth here in 2019 is Microsoft has delivered models for how to use Azure in PCI compliance. There are models for these different infrastructure outlays to ensure that you have the best foot forward from a security perspective. It's easy for you to demonstrate compliance, et cetera, without having to do a great deal of upheaval in your organization to acquire skills, et cetera. You can rent in that skill set. You can leverage your vendors or leverage your partners to come in and actually give you this perspective, build this airtight use case for you, and then present it internally to your company. Because there will be, as we mentioned, there will be some corporate shift, right? There will be some cultural shift, and I think you need all the friends you can.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you said it best. It's the specialization of the skill set and the fact that there are folks that actually do this for a living, right? I think when we were talking a couple of days ago, you even mentioned the concept that you don't do your own taxes, right? You've got someone that does it for you.
Yeah, and honestly, there's so many things I have to deal with. That's not something I can, I have less time. And I think in this situation where so many things are different, the role of the CIO is expanding dramatically. The number of factors and data points that they have to pull in, it's information constipation, right? It's easy to get gummed up in all of the news and feeds that are coming your way. You just, especially getting started, it's great to have a friend. It's great to have someone to bounce these ideas off of. And it's also, if you really want to get the value with the low risk, then you reach out, you pull in someone that is a specialist in that area and can help you understand the depth of the different factors you need to consider without having to go and spend a year trying to hire that guy, et cetera. You can get it now, get the same level of fidelity, and get moving. Of course, the slower you go, the less value you'll find.
Exactly. And I think, that's where something like a RiverMeadow comes into play, where you guys can actually help increase that speed. You have the expertise. It's not something you need to have on file. So why don't we go and take a look at sort of 3 different case studies here. First would be one organization that we worked with where they didn't have any sort of centralized view of digital. The functional leaders really had ad hoc control over their digital journey. And they really wanted to find a way to be able to use predictive analytics for their fault codes in the field with their product to be able to drive either technician placement, real-time data in the technician's hands, be able to offer more from a service perspective for their aftermarket, as well as inventory optimization. And on top of that, also be able to give back the information real-time to their development, their designers, so that they could improve on some of the fault codes that they were having out in the field. And I think one of the big issues that they had was they realized they needed to create a data lake in order to do this, but they didn't have all the data available to start off day one. So the question was, how could they build on this over time? And where would they store this so that you could actually have the speed that you needed to be able to execute this? The second one would be sort of a specialty chemical company where they're looking at specifically saying, we're in supply chain and procurement. We have poor data visibility. Our IT systems are antiquated. We have no contract management. And so they were really looking for a PaaS solution where they could get real-time market data. They could actually have SKU to raw material management all the way through, online, RFQing of processes, and then also automated machine learning feedback so that their strategic sourcing folks didn't have to spend the time necessarily digging through all the data. And for these two specifically, and then Mike, I'll let you go into your third one, those 2 business cases would be impossible without having that cloud flexibility to be able to scale up very quickly with the amount of data that was needed.
Sure. And then the final use case we have here is, again, we see this a lot. We see a lot of data center consolidation. We see a lot of M&A activity. And we had a client that had just over, a decade and a half of just M&A activity, buying up smaller companies, just had a proliferation of different technologies in remote data centers cast across the nation. They were hitting capacity limits. They were trying to fold data centers into other data centers. and they were just really frustrated with the speed and the pace. Enter investor relations. They got a bad investor relations report because of the weight of their antiquated technology for an emerging company, an emerging entertainment company. And really there was a bit of a mismatch in the image of the company as this new and fresh and exciting company and the age of their systems and how they were managing those systems. And so they began going through a data center modernization project that included cloud. So they ended up taking, there was also an element of license consolidation here, Ryan. Really what they found is they had so many instances of databases running in so many places, they could easily consolidate and start reducing their footprint from a data center perspective and a rent and ping power and pipe perspective, but also from a licensing perspective. They just had a proliferation of stuff. And in doing that, moving to the cloud helped them begin the shift in their company. And this is a company that lives in the cloud. They have online transactions, et cetera. So it's funny how a company that even that has some of these newer technologies and newer concepts can still have these old procurement systems and old finance mindsets, CapEx. This allowed them to respond to events faster. So if they put out an event that was happening in an area, they could see an uptick in sales and not have servers shut down because day one, a million people went to purchase online or something similar, and then lay the foundations for additional technology shifts, smarter apps on the phone, smarter data intelligence on the backside that will help you with similar products and services. And this talks about, as you mentioned, market expansion. They want to lay the foundation so they can hook in and layer upon some of these acquired companies and some of the complementary co-sell, cross-selling opportunities that they have inside their organization. But they had to move to a more flexible platform to really be able to start doing that plumbing.
Yeah. Yep. Totally agree. And I'm glad you talked about the concept that old, organizations that seemingly are cutting edge, it's the back end system sometimes, some of those defensive metrics that they really don't have, in the cloud, and they don't have that digitalization footprint. I think that's all we wanted to talk about today. I think we might have a couple minutes here for any questions that might be from any of our audience. I think we got one just talking about business cases and saying that it's not just about cost savings. So what are some of the other elements that are part of the business case? And I think, we touched on one, Michael, talking about security, but I think it's also being able to articulate the speed at which you're able to fail fast or start up fast as well. What do you think?
Well, and I would agree. And I think that survey kind of speaks to it, right? I think the misperception is that people are going to cloud for cost. And I think what you see is people are going to cloud for flexibility and speed, right? Of course, we want it to cost less. And of course, we want the cost to be right-sized for the opportunity. But I think that the biggest push to the cloud is for a set of enabling technologies that lets me get things done quicker, faster, cleaner than I've been able to do in the past. I think that's probably one of the number one reasons people go to the cloud. I think that's why you have the rise of this shadow IT. And I think that's why your respondents said flexibility and speed to deliver are the key capabilities that they're looking for cloud.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think, so much of IT in the past has been, okay, well, what's it going to cost? But it's not necessarily translated into what that value is. And I think this is the first time where the IT organizations, along with the CSO and CDO, can really talk about value to the organization as opposed to it just being a cost bucket.
Yeah. And then I think there was another question in there about kind of the perception of high cost. There's a perception out there, and I think one of the stigmas for going cloud-enabled technologies is the high cost. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and I think that this is kind of dovetails from what we were just talking about, but going even more specifically, the concept that cloud is going to cost people money, I think is really just a misnomer. People think that when you're going to make an IT shift, that it's going to be millions of dollars in order for the investment to actually come to fruition. But in reality, cloud is one of those things that really has the ability, because of its agility and the fact that you are able to data load across CapEx that you don't own or that you don't have to own, I should say. That's a huge opportunity from a cost perspective, where it's not a high cost fancy solution. It's really just more of an education on the concept that this isn't extra CapEx. This is actually switching to a better OpEx model, which allows you to try multiple things at once.
Well, and I think that's important. There is a shift, and I think a lot of the cost perception in the cloud is partly due to this shift. I think that traditionally, in 25 years of working inside of data centers, people forget that they spent $5 million on the SAN, or they spent obscene numbers of millions of dollars on just racks and racks and racks of servers sitting there, running 24 hours a day, costing them power, costing them electricity, et cetera. And a lot of those costs don't get pulled back into the total cost of the solution. They kind of get amortized out, or they get hidden in facility costs or something like that. So I think that's the first thing you have to tackle is the solutions you have in your data center probably cost you more than you know. The ability to account for that. It's not finance's job to tell IT exactly how much a service delivery costs. It's really IT's job to kind of filter through everything and really understand that perspective. But more to that is that perception of high cost. You cover the perception of cost in your business case, and you cover it in your value map. And as you're doing that analysis in your business case to say, we expect it's going to cost us this, but this is what it will deliver. And that delta is, business productivity. And it's the same thing with the flip side. Once I have that understanding of what the cost is, let's look at what gives me the most bang for my buck, the quickest, and give it a kind of a balanced portfolio as we begin this digital transformation journey. I don't have to bite off the biggest, highest gain project that's going to take 2 years to deliver. I can bite off smaller projects that have good business productivity, if that's kind of what you're using as your metric, and get a balance there. We'll start project A, but we'll gain value toward the business in projects C, D, and E as we go.
Exactly. And I think that's where you see sort of data being able to be layered on top of one another, where you have the same data required for multiple use cases. So if you pick something, if you do your old consulting 2x2 and think about, value versus time to money or value versus cost, you don't always have to pick the big bad one. You can actually find some low-hanging fruit.
Absolutely.
I think that may be all the time we have. Are there any other questions that we wanted to go through?
That was an excellent presentation. Thank you both. I don't see any other questions. There were a couple comments online from folks just being very excited about the topic. So thank you for this presentation. And I'm excited for episode number 2 next Tuesday at the same time. And I believe that will conclude the presentation. I will stop the recording, and thank you all so much for joining today. And we will be back here next week at the same time for episode 2. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you.
Very much.